Shavua Tov Rabotai. We are continuing our Mishna Yomi Masechet Gittin. We are up to Perek Chet Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnah should be Le'elu Nishmat Neria ben Svetlana Ranbai Veliyahu ben Burchai Israelov Chana bat Miriam Sason ben Rayan Yoshua ben Shifra Menuchatam beGan Eden Amen and Leavdi ben Chaim lechaim v'derefua shelemav Daniel Shalom ben Rosa betoch Shah Cholei Israel. Normally, when a husband divorces his wife, he must say to her when he gives her the get, "This is your get." As Shulchan Aruch discusses in Even HaEzel, chapter 136, Halakha 1. An exception to this rule is where the husband and wife are discussing their divorce, and he then hands her a get. In this case, she is divorced, even if he says nothing as he gives it to her, since it is evident that he intends it to be for divorce. Therefore, it's valid. However, this is true only if he gives her the get in a regular way. Our Mishnah discusses the law if after discussing their divorce, he gives her the get in an unusual way. Amar lach kinsishta chovzeh. If he said to her as he handed her the get, "Take this loan document," he was perhaps embarrassed to tell her that he was divorcing her. O shemitza'atu me'achorav. Or if she found the get behind him on his back, and he twisted his back toward her so that she should take it from there, which is an unusual way to give a get. A husband must give the get to his wife, as the Torah says in Dvarim chapter 24 verse 1, he shall place it in her hand. She cannot take it on her own, so he must do some action to give her the get. By twisting his back toward her, he is doing an action, even though she then takes it off his back herself. And she then reads it and discovers that it is her get. And no get, it is not a valid get. Ad shamar lah he gitech, until he tells her, "Here is your get," making it clear that he is divorcing her. Since in both of these cases it was not obvious when he gave her the get that he meant to divorce her, he must make it clear afterward that it is her get. The Torah states in that verse, he shall write a document of separation and place it in her hand, which teaches that it must be clear that what he gave her is a document of separation. In other words, that he is divorcing her. When he says that the get is some other document, or when he gives it to her in an unusual way, it is not clear that he is divorcing her. Our Mishnah teaches that he can say this even after he has already given her the get, as long as it is still in her hand. A similar case, Natan bi'adah yishena. If he placed the get in her hand while she was sleeping, ne'ora kora varehu gita, and she then wakes up, reads it, and discovers that it is her get. A no get, it is not a valid get, even if they were discussing their divorce just before she fell asleep. Ad shomar lah he gitech, until he says to her after she wakes up, "Here's your get." Since he placed the get in her hand when she was asleep and not able to protect it, she did not acquire it at that point. Since it is still in her hand, when she wakes up and reads it, she acquires it then. But the husband must say to her, "Here is your get." Since when he gave her the get, it could not take effect, it is not clear that he meant to divorce her. Therefore, he must make it clear after she wakes up. Now, in the previous Mishnah, we learned that if a husband throws a get for his wife into her property, she is divorced. While if he throws it into her hand and lands in his property, she is not divorced. While the Mishnah now teaches the law in a case where he throws the get into an area that does not belong to either of them. If she was standing in a public area and he threw the get to her and it landed on the ground, the law is as follows. Karov lah migoreshet. If it lands close to her, meaning if it lands in a place where only she can protect it, but he cannot, she is divorced. For example, if they are on opposite sides of a stream and he throws it to her side. Karov lo enah migoreshet. If it lands close to him, meaning in a place where only he can protect it, but she cannot, she is not divorced. Now, it does not matter who is closer. What matters is who can protect the get, as the Rav explains based off the Gemara in Gittin, page 78b. Now, normally, one does not acquire an object that is in a public area simply because he can protect it. However, the rabbis were concerned that this husband might leave and never give her another get. Therefore, the rabbis decreed that when a husband throws a get and it lands in a place only the wife can protect it, she acquires it and thereby becomes divorced. Mechetza al mechetza migoreshet ve'enah migoreshet. And if it lands halfway between them, meaning a place where either of them can protect it on their own, or a place where neither of them can protect it without the other, she is divorced but not divorced, meaning her divorce is in doubt and she therefore needs a new get before she can marry someone else. As the Rav writes based on the Gemara in Gittin, page 78b, that the special rabbinic decree that a woman acquires a get that falls close to her is no longer used in practice. As the Rav writes, the halacha is she's not divorced until the get reaches her hand or her domain. And that is end of Mishnah Bet. Right, that is what the Rav writes based on the Gemara on page 78b. That is in a Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel, now having learned the law for a husband who throws a get to his wife in a public place, the Mishnah teaches about two other matters for which the rule is the same. V'chen inan kiddushin, and the law is the same with regard to kiddushin. If a man throws money to a woman in a public area and says to her that she should be betrothed to him with this money, because we know erusin is the first step in a marriage, one of the ways of establishing this bond is by giving the woman money or any object of value such as a ring and saying to her, you are hereby betrothed to me with this money or ring. If it lands close to her in a place where only she can protect it, they are betrothed. If it lands close to him in a place where only he can protect it, they are not betrothed. And if it lands in a place that is halfway between them, where either of them can protect it or where neither of them can protect it without the other, the betrothal is in doubt. Therefore, he must betroth her again if he wants to marry her, but she may not marry anyone else unless he gives her a get. And the law is the same with regard to a borrower repaying a debt, as the Mishnah explains. If the person who lent him money said to him, throw me the money I am owed, and he threw it to him in a public area, but the money was lost before the lender could pick it up. For example, an animal ran off with it. Then the law is as follows. If it landed close to the lender in a place where only he could protect it, the borrower has succeeded in repaying the debt because the money became the lender's as soon as it landed. Since the lender told him to throw the money toward him, the borrower has fulfilled his obligation to repay the debt because the money became legally the lender's when it landed. If it landed close to the borrower in a place where only he can protect it, then the borrower still owes the money because the money he threw was never acquired by the lender. And if it landed halfway between them in a place where either one can protect it or where neither one can protect it on his own, so it's uncertain who owned the money that was lost, they divide the money between them. The borrower must pay again half the money he owed, and the lender loses the other half. As we learned in the previous Mishnah, the law that a person acquires something that falls close to him was a special decree instituted by the rabbis to make it easier for women to receive their divorces. This works for Kiddushin as well, only because the Torah compares Kiddushin to divorce. The Torah in Dvarim chapter 24 verse 1 compares the process of divorcing a wife to that of marrying a wife. Therefore, once the rabbis instituted that a woman acquires her get by having a land close to her, they instituted that a woman acquires the money for betrothal in the same way. There is really no reason for this type of acquisition to work for anything else. The Gemara in Gittin, page 78b, explains that it works for repaying a debt only where the lender says that he is willing to accept repayment according to the rules of get. The lender says to the borrower, throw me the money you owe me, and let it be according to the rules of Gittin. Now, it was stated in Mishnah 1 that if a husband throws a get into his wife's property, she is divorced. The Mishnah now explains at what point the get is considered to be in her property. If she was standing on top of the roof of her house, and he was standing below in his courtyard. Now the house belonged to her, and the courtyard next to it belonged to him. And he threw the get up to her. As soon as it reaches the airspace of the roof, meaning as soon as it falls to within 3 tvachim of the surface of the roof, she is divorced because it is as if the get has already landed on a roof. This is based on the rule of Lavud, which teaches that when two objects are less than 3 tvachim apart, it is as if they are connected. Therefore, once the get falls to within 3 tvachim of the roof, even if the wind blows the get away before it actually lands, she is divorced. Now the Mishnah is discussing a roof that has no walls around it. Since the wind can blow the get away, the get is not considered to be in her property until it is within 3 tvachim of the roof. However, if there is a wall around the roof, she is divorced as soon as the get falls inside the walls, since the walls protect the get from being blown away by the wind. If he was above on the roof of his house and she was below in her courtyard, so in this case, he owned the house and she owned the courtyard, and he threw the get to her, once the get leaves the area of the roof and is inside the walls of her courtyard, as it falls to the ground, even if it is erased by a rain or burned by a fire before it lands, she is divorced because her courtyard acquired the get for her before it was destroyed. Now the Mishnah speaks of a case where the get landed in a fire that was lit after he threw the get. If the fire was already burning before he threw it, she would not be divorced because this get was never going to land in the courtyard. The airspace of a courtyard acquires only things that are expected to land in it. So again, the Mishnah is talking about a case where the get landed in a fire that was lit after he threw the get, and that's why it is valid. And that is on Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.